15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6.
This is 420 Law Office Radio.
Well, hello, this is Stuart Richland from 420LawOffice.com, and here on the YouTube channel and on the radio program. What a total pleasure it is to join you. I've got so much to share with you. This evening we have an original bunch of material as well as a bunch of stuff from the internet to share. We have an interview with Dejay Kuti from CannabisSavesLives.com. I'm going to put that towards the end. We have an interview with the proprietor of MCCDirectory.org, Liz McDuffie. Put that towards the beginning. And we have all kinds of clips, in particular, a small tribute to the great late Aaron Russo. Aaron Russo happened to have been a client of mine for a minute, not for any of the most important things that you know him from, such as the movie Trading Places or the movie The Rose. But in this case, I was representing Aaron just in a small arbitration before the Writers Guild, but I got to know an amazing man, and I found out about his crusade for justice and for freedom and against tyranny, in particular with reference to taxation. And so we're going to have a little bit from Aaron Russo about the New World Order, about taxation, about the IRS, about the Fed, as a little side note. We're also going to hear from Ron Paul about the same topics and about medical marijuana and the nanny state. We're going to hear from Dr. Tashkin from UCLA, who proved that marijuana smoking actually protects the lungs and causes no damage. So there's lots to listen to and lots to share. So let's get on with the show. And of course, another interesting story we'll be listening to, the Department of Homeland Security is searching Facebook and Twitter for the words marijuana and other keywords. And I hope you enjoyed the new intro music. Let's get to it. Thank you again for joining 420 Law Office Radio. Okay, we have a really great thing going on here, right here in our office. And Liz McDuffie, she's here. She just said she liked my website. Liz McDuffie is a very important participant in California and Southern California and really America and the world in making the transition to legitimate, compliant medical marijuana. Welcome to our radio show, Liz.
Oh, thank you. That's quite an introduction.
Well, your work is great over there at MCCDirectory.org. Anyone who's listening to this radio show, you should immediately go to your computer and type in MCCDirectory.org. That's Mary, Charlie, Charlie, MCCDirectory.org, where Liz McDuffie has a school, and it is a college for medical marijuana information. And she has, Bruce Margolin and Normal on her side. And I know you just got a license, you just got a certification to teach people who, pursuant to the state of California, continuing education for certain class of people who care for patients. That's in in-house hospice care and other types of home care. And that's for their license. If they want to keep their license up, they have to get continuing education. Liz McDuffie can give it to them now, and it's all about medical marijuana. Isn't that right?
Yes. Yes,
so,
it is.
How many days a week do you have classes over there at your school, Liz?
Oh, we have generally we have roughly 4 classes a week.
And,
roughly 4 classes a week.
And what would you say are the most popular classes?
Well, probably the most attended class is the one that you refer so many of your clients to, which would be MCC 121, which really covers in detail California's medical marijuana program, SB 420.
Right, and you have a really kind of a 1-2 punch. They take 121 and 122 over a weekend, and that gives them a chance to learn about the primary caregiver defense as well as the co-op and collective defense, and here's some of your great ideas about how patients may assert their rights. And I understand you also have cultivation classes and breeding classes You still have
Yes, yes, we do. We do. We have cultivation classes are held by once every 3 months. We have the honor of having the notable DJ Short, very famous breeder for those of you that may not know the name, and he will be here this weekend. He'll be having a class this Saturday and Sunday at the MCC. If you go onto the website, you can see the time. And we also have Peter Giron. Peter's been teaching cultivation now for over 3 years at the MCC. And we know from his participants that he's a very successful instructor.
Well, that's terrific. And let's see, you also have information for people who want to learn how to make tinctures, people who want to make candies. And, you know, the candies are a very major focus for me right now, Liz, because one of my dear friend's wives is going through second-stage cancer chemotherapy, and the thing that saved her life was a cannabis lozenge. And for anyone who thinks that people can just make their own medicine and we don't need collectives and caregivers, bullshit. When someone is sick, they don't have time to learn how to now create medical quality cannabis. They need to have collectives so that they can get access to their medicine. And my dear friend's wife, she had lost 35 pounds. You guys that are devoted listeners heard the interview last week. She lost 35 pounds in just a couple days behind this chemo. And if it wasn't for these lozenges, she might have even lost her life. So thank God for the medical marijuana caregivers and collective management and all the patients working together. And anyone who wants to be a master of this, you need more information. Knowledge is power, and Liz McDuffie is the mecca of information.
Well, I don't know what I can add after that that description of the MCC. I think you really said it's wonderful. Thank you so much. I have to come more often.
That's right. You'll get a compliment every time. Okay, guys, check out Liz and her wonderful class. I promise you, a pound of prevention is worth 10 tons of cure. And if you go to Liz McDuffie's class and focus on your rights, you won't make mistakes that can be very costly to your freedom and to your pocketbook. No one wants to have to hire a defense attorney. And when you could learn the law and become compliant and be so legit that you will reduce your chance of problem in the first instance.
Countless studies have failed to find a link between cannabis smoking and cancer, and in fact have shown that heavy marijuana users have considerably fewer cancers than the general population.
Dr. Donald Tashkin is a very good researcher at UCLA. He is a pulmonologist. His research demonstrated that the incidence of lung cancer in people who smoked cannabis was less than the incidence of lung cancer in people who smoked nothing at all.
We actually succeeded in studying about 600 lung cancer cases, about 600 head and neck cancer cases, and the bottom line is we failed to find any positive association between marijuana, even heavy marijuana use, which we defined as more than 10 joint years. Even if you look at more than 60 joint years, a joint a day, times the number of joints smoked, we could not see an association. So I think it's really essentially a negative study. We failed to find any positive association with cancer.
Is it possible that the tar in smoked pot could be causing malignancies while the chemical constituents in pot are curing them at the same time? It was only in the 1960s that fat-soluble THC was isolated from pot plants and declared the substance that got us high.
These substances in the cannabis plant which are active are kind of fatty-like, lipid-like, and they're hard to work with. So it has been very hard for chemists to get a handle on these kind of substances. Therefore, it took until 1964 for Raphael Meshulam and his colleague Adri to discover the active compound in the cannabis plant, which they called then delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or as we know it, THC.
The compound that we isolated, 1964, tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, has been looked into in great depth. And indeed, for the next 20 years, people got to know a lot about the chemistry, a lot about the clinical effects, a lot about the biochemistry of THC. One thing was still unknown 20 years later, I mean, I'm speaking now of 1964 till the mid-80s, nothing was known about the mechanism. How does THC act in the body?
Dozens of major studies have been published in the last few years that indicate that the chemicals in cannabis, in the lab and in animals, have a significant effect on fighting almost all major cancers, including brain, breast, prostate, lung, thyroid, colon, skin, pituitary, melanoma, and leukemia cancers. They do this by promoting the death of cancer cells that have forgotten how to die, as well as a reduction in their crucial blood supply, while leaving healthy cells untouched. But why, you may wonder, would cannabis have any effect on cancer? The answer can be explained in one word: endocannabinoids. Amazing as it sounds, we're all born with a form of cannabis already in our bodies. It's called the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system, or ECS, influences multiple physiological processes. This intricate system modulates energy intake as well as nutrient transport, metabolism, and storage. A completely natural collection of compounds, endocannabinoids are our body's own form of marijuana and are involved in most of our cells and structures. They control a variety of functions in the nervous system, heart, reproductive, and immune systems. Endocannabinoid messengers help the cells communicate. Typically, they protect our good cells while killing the bad ones, like cancer cells. In all animals, the nervous system is made of the same components, large numbers of nerve cells carrying electrical signals. And wherever the cells meet, these signals are passed to a receptor in the next cell by a chemical messenger called a neurotransmitter. Inside the brain, there are different types of neurotransmitters, including dopamine and serotonin. All animals, from rodents to fish to elephants to humans, have inherited this basic structure. But hundreds of millions of years ago, the sea squirt and other primitive invertebrates evolved an innovation to this system.
What happened was the nervous system acquired a new chemical, if you like, that had a new flavor, a new type of chemical. And it's this chemical that is related in structure, has a similar shape to the chemical that's found in cannabis.
Because of this similarity, these new signals came to be known as cannabinoids. It was inevitable that eventually cannabis would meet its perfect partner: us. Whether you like it or not, each and every one of us is fundamentally wired to respond to cannabis.
Now, receptors are not built in our brain or anywhere in our body, of course, or animal bodies, because there is a plant out there that will produce a compound that acts on them. That just doesn't work that way. Receptors are found in our body because we produce compound that will activate those receptors. So obviously we thought that there should be endogenous compounds which act on those receptors. The fact that there is a plant compound, a tetrahydrocannabinol, a THC, which acts on those receptors, is just a quirk of nature. Good Italian friend Di Maso summarized the activity, which is really a summary. Says, well, what do the endocannabinoids do? They relax, help us eat, sleep, forget, and protect. Not remember, forget. And don't think that forgetting is less important than recalling. We should have a system to forget. Otherwise, well, if you wish, we can burst. If you go down a mall and see 1,000 faces, do you want to remember all of them? Of course not.
Despite all the difficulties, there's a group of doctors in the U.S. and abroad who have been advancing the research on the medical use of cannabis with highly impressive and sometimes revolutionary discoveries.
In a scholarly cancer review article published in 2009, there were over 421 chemical compounds identified in the cannabis plant. And within this group of natural substances, there are many chemicals that have significant anti-tumor properties at low enough doses to where they would be effective cancer treatments. That's an important part of this. It's one thing to be able to kill a cancer cell, but could you really survive such a treatment?
a botanist from the University of Colorado Springs branch, Robert Melamede, who has written an article sort of comparing the carcinogenic effect of cannabis with tobacco and explaining why he thinks that cannabis has the anti-cancer effect for lung cancer.
There's nothing else that impacts on so many of our illnesses. You see, when I talk about these age-related illnesses, we're all aging, but we don't all come down with cardiovascular disease. We don't all come down with autoimmune disease. We don't all come down with cognitive dysfunction. We don't all come down with cancer. But the chances are we're going to come down with one of them. All right? And here we have this one drug that's able to help us holistically with our biochemistry to restore balance. You know, cannabinoids kill cancer cells in many cases. People are not aware of that. They think cancer, cannabis, anti-nausea. It's way beyond that.
There are also studies taking a look at other organ systems that have found that marijuana seeks out the cancerous cells and preferentially kills them over the healthy cells.
There's a wealth of laboratory evidence that these anti-tumor properties kill cancer cells in a variety of ways. There are multiple mechanisms of action identified by which cannabis kills cancer cells, and they're divided into various categories. And among these are anti-proliferative effects. Normally, that's one of the hallmarks of a cancer cell, is that it just keeps reproducing. So if you stop the reproduction, that's an anti-proliferative effect. There are anti-angiogenesis effects, and this means that the cannabinoids will stop the tumor from being able to elaborate or grow new blood vessels to support the growth of the tumor. There are anti-metastatic effects, and that is simple enough to mean that the cannabinoids block the ability of the cancer cells to spread into other tissues. And there's another effect that has a wild name, apoptotic effect. Apoptosis refers to the ability of cannabinoids to speed the death of the abnormal cells. And that's something that is especially important in cancer, because you're able to hasten the death of the cell without disturbing the normal cells around it.
Seth Research Laboratories in California have recently demonstrated that in some tumors, cancer cells are killed by marijuana, while the other healthy cells are left untouched. Cells that stop moving and become still white dots are dead cancer cells. The ability of cannabinoids to kill bad cells while protecting healthy ones is particularly important when we're talking about brain cancer because of the so-called blood-brain barrier. The brain has to be sheltered from outside influences that might hitch a ride on the bloodstream and cause havoc. What is exciting and unique about cannabinoids is that they can pass through the blood-brain barrier because of their slippery, fat-loving nature. Cannabinoids get right into the brain's cancer cells by moving easily through the cell's membranes, which are also composed of lipids. The evidence is piling up in mice-infested labs that the endocannabinoid system, when stimulated by cannabinoids, has an anti-tumor effect and can instruct cancer cells to commit suicide.
This was done by Manuel Guzman's group within the past less than 10 years, and what they showed there was that originally that THC, when injected into a brain tumor in mice and rats, a significant number of those animals the tumor would regress and disappear, so that you actually had survival of rats that would otherwise die. And they examined all the surrounding nerve tissue, and that was all fine, because remember, once again, cannabinoids protect nerves.
Dr. Manuel Guzman is a professor of biochemistry and molecular biology in Madrid, Spain, and is known for his groundbreaking studies on medical cannabis.
Hemos observado que los cannabinoides tienen un efecto inductor de la muerte de las células tumorales, un efecto inhibidor de lo que es el crecimiento, la multiplicación de las células tumorales. Lo que hacen es disminuir el crecimiento de los tumores.
If cannabis might be the miracle cancer cure that everybody's been searching for, then why don't doctors everywhere know about it?
people have a hard time believing that cannabis can have all of these fantastic effects that are described. But what we're doing is we're just stimulating a natural system that's already there. This has been developing for hundreds of millions of years. The invertebrates, the sea squirts, the hydra, there are primitive endocannabinoid systems in those organisms dating back 600-700 million years ago. The cannabis plant came along maybe 50 or 60 million years ago.
Why aren't billions in funds being directed toward cannabinoid research by the organizations that raise money for cancer therapies?
We're talking about medical research that, it's really a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I'm thrilled that there's really more research taking place now really than any time in history when it comes to the therapeutic use of cannabis, and specifically the cannabinoids, the components in cannabis. Unfortunately, a lot of that research is still relegated to taking place overseas. We see a little bit now finally taking place in this country, but really the United States remains fairly well behind.
Hello, my name is Stuart Richland, and I've been an attorney for about 25 years, focusing on the rights of medical marijuana patients for about 5 years. If our office can be of assistance with reference to any situation you have, please give us a call at 888-420-LAW-1. That's 888-420-LAW-1. Are you making any of the following mistakes with reference to medical marijuana law? Are you unaware of federal law and the strict prohibition against growing, selling? Are you aware of state law and the requirements with reference to nonprofit, etc.? And are you in compliance with your local municipality and county rules? You may need a compliance check. You may need an expert witness. I've been qualified in court to testify with reference to the corporate structures on medical marijuana. If you need any of the services that I've described, or if you'd like to confront your city in litigation, as we've done with the Los Angeles litigation, in which my office is one of the proud, successful plaintiffs' lawyers that obtained an injunction against the City of Los Angeles marijuana ordinance, please give us a call so we can be of service. Thanks for listening, and take good care.
Good morning.
Good morning, DJ. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Beautiful day today.
Well, it sure is. It's a great day to be in Southern California, and it's a great day to be alive and to be free and to celebrate all the good things, and also to move forward.
For better things.
Yeah, to move forward our chosen work. And, one of the most important things that I am proud to be part of is, civil rights, the evolution of people expressing their individuality, taking responsibility for their own lives, for their own health, and for their own activities, as long as they don't hurt someone else. That doesn't violate the real laws that count. and we're trying to reform the law. And DJ, for those that are not familiar with DJ's work, that means you just haven't been paying attention here in Southern California, because DJ and Patient Advocacy Network and CannabisSavesLives.com is an important part of the tapestry here in LA. I mean, one of the first people I've ever seen take a bullhorn to City Hall or to the Federal Building and not bat an eye. So welcome to the program, DJ.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a really exciting time. I think, where we're at with California right now is, of course, we have a voter initiative process in our state. Not every state in the union has that. And, as usual, there's generally a number of initiatives regarding cannabis. And it appears that this year, all of the initiatives are going to fail. They do not have enough money. They do not have enough signatures. As far as I can hear, it sounds like there's still a lot of contention and mismanagement and so forth that kind of, I think, got started with Prop 19 and all that kind of infighting and disagreeing, and why there were so many initiatives this year. But what that means for us is we have to pay attention now on what's going on the legislative level, because whatever legislation is brought up through the Assembly and the Senate is going to most likely become law. Several weeks ago when the initiatives were out gathering signatures, there was more of a landscape that we could be looking at the possibility of the legislature taking whatever act they pass and whatever act gets passed through the voters, and the legislature having to figure out how to blend the new laws together. But it looks like that's not going to happen. It looks like anything and everything that affects medical cannabis is going to be coming from our state legislature. About 2 weeks ago now, Assembly Member Tom Amiano has introduced Assembly Bill 2312, and I encourage all of your listeners to please take a look at it. If they're a member of PAN, they've already got it in their inbox along with some discussion regarding it, but it is a statewide piece of legislation to regulate the dispensaries on a statewide level. So therefore, all those people who are operating collectives in areas where there's a moratorium or a ban or no regulation whatsoever, they're going to have an opportunity to apply and get a license through the state. The legislation says that localities cannot ban, that's not an all-out ban is not allowed. However, the problems, the feedback I'm getting back from some people where they see it problematic is just to say you're a small independent person growing enough medicine at home for 4, 5, 6 people. You're not allowed to sell that medicine without becoming a collective. You are not allowed to be remunerated for your expenses unless you have one of these licenses. I don't know how much time you've had to take a look at AB 2312. Always the big thing about the legislature introducing something that tries to amend or add to Prop 215 is whether it's legal to do so. Like I said, I don't know if you've had much time to look at it and give any input as to where you see the legislature might be overstepping their bounds with the voter initiative.
Well, I've scanned it, but I can't say that I'm in a position to make a definitive comment or analysis of it. But I will say that the tipping point will be, does the given piece of legislation give or take away from the rights that were established by the proposition measure? The rule is only that the legislature cannot derogate from or take away rights. So they could certainly add more protections and more rights. They just can't take it away. And Tom Maniano is certainly no slouch. A very progressive and important player. I'm sure that he cast the language, and from what I saw, the language is cast in a way that it doesn't take away from the proposition. So I don't think that there will be a similar problem that we had, for instance, in the Kelly case in 2010, where the judges finally caught up with the reality and said, wait a minute, legislature, you can't take away from rights that are created by the people's proposition, and so therefore the plant count and weight count limits of SB 420 were thrown out. So right. I think it's...
So the count in this piece of legislation is only one dispensary for 50,000 people, which will take LA down to 88 licenses on the state level.
Yeah, that's a little bit disturbing. It's based upon census data.
Yeah, so they're saying one collective allowed for every 50,000 in a community. So in LA, when you're looking at a metropolitan area of 4.4 million, if they're going to do that, then we're talking about a community now that has probably in excess of 800 in operation, probably well over 400 involved in some type of litigation or settlement, and now state legislation saying that because our city hasn't given any licenses, the state can take Los Angeles down to 88 collectives.
Well, that'll be a disaster. Although when you think it through, it's if 5% of the population at any given time is a medical marijuana patient, then that would mean 2,500 people in a collective, which doesn't seem like a burdensome count or problem to my first view of it. I mean, maybe it sort of conflicts with the federal problem that we have, because when there's a concentration of collectives and more people that are members of each collective, then there's more likelihood that the Fed will consider that the activity is within the higher priority level. So that's a little bit
well,
of a
they're
problem.
talking about safe and affordable access. And Tom Amiano hails from San Francisco, so he's very familiar with small, relatively, geographically small San Francisco. And of course, the way this piece of legislation is written is that if you're a collective that already has a license through a community and you're in good standing, you're grandfathered under the state regulations. So let's just say, for example, LA did have an ordinance, and let's just say 400, 500, 600 collectives were allowed to have those licenses. This 50,000 cap, this one collective for 50,000 people cap, that it wouldn't matter. This cap is not going to matter to San Francisco because they've got like 23 or 28 dispensaries operating.
Well, parenthetically, let me.
I
hear you, but let's make sure to make a distinction between operating collectives and licensed collectives. Even in the city of Los Angeles, that would presuppose that there's some activity on the part of the city of LA to finally have a proper license for medical marijuana. So, in other words, a city. The problem that you're highlighting is that a city can lose its autonomy and its control over the phenomenon if they don't get off the dime and create a licensing scheme.
Right. No, that's absolutely. Yeah, no, that's right. Because like I said, there's definitely more than one collective for 50,000 in San Francisco, but that's okay because that community has regulations. Those collectives have their permits, and so the state's not going to question it. They're just going to grandfather them in. So while I read this, I can kind of see where Tom Amiano's going with it. I can see, unfortunately, this law can be very problematic for those small people at home taking care of a few patients and a big city like LA that has basically no ordinance in place.
Yeah, well, it makes me think that Amiano needs to consider those jurisdictions that don't have explicit licensing schemes and possibly consider insertion of language that would also include some form of compliance formula other than a license, so that in those areas where there's not yet been a license, but there's a collective that is at least 600 under state law, or more conservatively 1,000 feet from schools, etc., and which has a seller's permit, under certain circumstances could qualify.
This piece of legislation is similar to SB 420 in that what this piece of legislation is trying to do is establish the board, the commission that is going to approve or deny and renew these licenses. And I think what he's going to do, instead of trying to work out these kinds of details in the legislation, he's just going to put it on the lap of the people who get appointed to serve on this commission. And that's the other thing, is who gets to serve on this commission. This is an issue that is affecting patients, and this commission is only made up with one patient advocate.
That's preposterous and horrible. And plus, without having, at least the minor safeguard of being able to diselect or impeach people who represent us, when you get an appointed board making decisions about people's health and safety and lives, boy, that's very disturbing. It sounds a little bit Soviet Union style, not like our country.
Well, and then when you talk about the people who are sitting at the table offering money to certain people on the state level to make sure they get seated on that board so that they can pick and choose who they want to be on there. And you can probably kind of imagine some of the people you've seen in our community who would like to play medical marijuana god and wave a magic wand and get to choose who stays and who goes.
Right, and we've had some conflicts of interest we've seen between people who claim to be objective lobbyists but who themselves actually have a financial stake in one or more collectives.
Absolutely.
So I think
usually more than one. So yeah, that's kind of what we have going on. It's like you read it on the surface, but then when you read between the lines, you can see the California politics oozing through it.
Absolutely. Well, this has been very eye-opening, and I'm going to go ahead and spend a little more time on the proposition situation. What I've picked up on, and I think it was about a week ago, was that the general trend, because of the lack of interest, financing, and other considerations, was that the community was going to focus more on PR and lobbying. And so the tremendous expense that was put forth last time around, and which really caused this division in the community with Prop 19, isn't going to be replayed. But I think that the lessons need to be learned, and the real problem with 19 remains, and it sort of permeates this Amaniano's proposal as well, is that there are people who will try to fill the vacuum and try to dominate and take over the phenomenon, and usually for self-interest. And so the goal is to continually to wrestle away the notion that someone should control the phenomenon. It should just really be in the hands of the patients, which are a subgroup of we the people. And so the more that government gets involved, the more of these same problems we have, with education and with the military and other things will certainly kick in. What I love about the vagueness, in some ways, of SB 420, or the way the system is currently constituted with the guidelines, is at least...
You mean Prop 215?
No, I meant SB 420. Is that
Okay.
at least there is a system in place which says that it is the patients that have the right to be in collectives, because you have to think about who owns the right. When you think about SB 420, it establishes that patients may associate within the state, collectively or cooperatively. So then you think, well, patients, who is that? Well, that's each and every patient has the right to associate, and therefore, arguably, to create a collective. And that any group of friends, neighbors, family members who are patients, if they are patients, they have the right to socialize within the state, to collectively and cooperatively get their medicine together, grow it, or
and
distribute
so this legislation is saying you only have that right if you have one of these licenses.
Right, and you have to get that from one of our cronies.
You have to get that from one of our appointed people who basically are currently, as we speak, trying to figure out which person in Sacramento they need to butter up and pay to get one of those seats.
Yeah, that's... imagine if you had to know someone to get a driver's license, how you'd have to kind of structure maybe your activity from the age of maybe 14 through 16, maybe volunteering, getting involved in things you didn't really want to do, buttering people up, giving favors. Who knows?
For the privilege to be able to drive a car.
Sure, and you would restructure your whole. I mean, if it was important to you to drive, you'd really have to change your time. It would create a whole agenda, and it would restructure your priorities. And so, what a waste! And the idea that the same cobweb of bad administration is going to now try to micromanage each and every community in the state.
Right.
That would be foolish.
And the reason they're doing this is a reaction. I was in Sacramento back in late November, early December, and met with Tom Amiano's staff, and we knew this was coming down the pipe. And it was really a matter of who was going to get their legislation on the table first, because Tom Amiano was working on something, Mark Leno was working on something, Kamala Harris's office was working on something, and they were all doing this in reaction to the announcement that was made in Sacramento by the 4 district attorneys back in October, basically that they were going to bust all the dispensaries, and California's collectives were illegal, and they were coming down with the hammer. And this is their response. This is the response from our elected officials to try to show the feds that California does have some type of control over their dispensaries. So unfortunately, this law is not like, oh, we've been thinking about this ever since Prop 215 passed, but no, we're now doing something about it because U.S. attorneys got on Jerry Brown's lawn and threatened the entire state of California.
True, so, and ironically, the comparison was made between our state and Colorado, which at the time was not having any problem with raids, and the argument was put forth that the reason that Colorado wasn't being raided was because they had a better regulatory system. But as we know now, the government just recently turned their gun sights on Colorado. So I think that
and the thing is that at the same time that we were being threatened by U.S. attorneys in California, the banking letter was going through Colorado. They had that problem all summer with dispensaries. All the dispensaries in Colorado became cash businesses because of that. And then they all got the landlord letter. And I kind of follow on Colorado because I also do a weekly radio show, the Hollywood Hemptress Hour on New Dissident Radio. People can find us there. And one of our regular weekly guests lives in Colorado. We were kind of verifying this with her, and sure enough, if any collective that was within 1,000 feet of a school anywhere in the state of Colorado at this point is shut down.
Well, I don't mean to brag or boast, but I mean anyone who came through for my consultation in the last 6 years has known about the 1,000-foot rule. And, it just takes knowledge and the choice of how to go. And it starts with getting good information. Well, the interesting thing about the Colorado phenomenon is that in reaction to the federal threat, and without a lot of thought, now our course has been set towards these state rules, which really won't have the intended effect at all, because the federal government has shown that they are, based on the Cole Memorandum, ready, willing, and able to arrest any commercial activity whatsoever with reference to cultivating and distributing and transporting cannabis. So we really need federal reform more than ever. And the idea that we're going to continue to go through the next millennium or the next century with this schism just doesn't make any sense. Some of the things that I'm going to be celebrating on today's show, one of the things we're going to do is a tribute to Gatewood Galbraith, the Kentucky governor candidate, 6-time candidate, never did get elected, who
I'm
was
from Indiana. I've crossed paths with him on many times.
right. So he's been an
I'm
eloquent
familiar with him.
an eloquent speaker and an old voice, and someone who passed away in January, and I didn't really have a chance to mark it. So we're going to do something for him today. And then I also have, and I've also been going through the web to just kind of see what else I wanted to play, and I'm going to play something from Aaron Russo, another fallen hero who did the movie Freedom to Fascism. He was a producer who created, he did The Rose and Trading Places with Eddie Murphy, and then he did this movie about the Federal Reserve and about losing freedom to fascism in this country. And then I've got a little bit here I'm going to play from the Young Turks, where they talked about the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, is searching Facebook and Twitter for marijuana and other keywords. While we have kind of budgetary disaster, and they're looking for the word marijuana, and I have a feeling they probably found it everywhere they looked. So anyway,
well, interestingly enough, I heard yesterday that the government has earmarked $54 million on an ad campaign just to teach people how horrible the act of smoking is. It's an anti-smoking campaign. But I know that whenever the government is using this kind of money, it's not big tobacco that they necessarily are trying to go after, because big tobacco is their friend. It's like they're trying to set the stage, again, to just let everybody know that any and all smoking is bad for you. And we don't have the proof for that. But again, you always have to follow the money and read between the lines. You were talking about the need for federal change, and I hope that also your listeners will go to our website at cannabissaveslives.org and click over to our blog so that they can download our position paper, which is entitled Removing Cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act, Why Rescheduling Marijuana Will Not End the State-Federal Conflict Over Medical Cannabis. And we talk about this whole idea. Many of the national policy organizations for many years have been fighting the federal government with lawsuits and petitions to reschedule marijuana from a 1 to a 2 through 5. And what those national policy organizations who have raised millions of dollars to the marijuana community over the years, what they haven't told you is that if marijuana goes from a 1 to a 2 through 5, cultivating and dispensing are just as illegal. If anything, moving it to a 2 through 5 gives the DEA even more teeth to say say no. You can only get this at Walgreens. It has to be grown by a university or the government. You cannot grow your own. You cannot have a little mom and pop dispensary. And kind of unbeknownst to the marijuana community for almost a decade now, certain organizations have been selling this idea. I straight up had somebody from a national policy org, one of the biggest ones in the country, tell me, he said, Vijay, what better way for me to get a job as a six-figure pharmaceutical lobbyist than to sell marijuana off to the FDA and the pharmaceutical companies? I mean, they told me straight away that their plan was to get marijuana into the hands of the pharmaceutical companies. Our position paper...
Sorry, stand by.
That's okay.
We've got a
Our
dog.
position paper is exploring not having cannabis in the Controlled Substances Act at all. Marijuana should not be anywhere in that.
Of course, it needs to be
descheduled. Chapter 24 and Chapter 25 of the ATF
It needs to be
code.
descheduled, not rescheduled.
Right, and we discussed that in our position paper, and what we look at are Chapters 24 and 25 of the ATF code. And if you look at the way the federal law is already set up to deal with vineyards and wineries and the cultivation of hops and breweries, you can put medical cannabis cultivation and dispensaries already in the model that the federal government has for beer and wine.
Yeah, and of course there is a proposal on that along those lines too. But of course, then you have the alcohol industry, which wants to control the phenomenon. And the concern that I have about... Let me just finish.
If we change it federally, it's going to get controlled by somebody.
Well, the concern is...
What we want to ask, do we want the pharmaceutical companies to control it? No. Do you want big tobacco to control it? No, because you can't grow your own tobacco. But at least in this country, you can grow your own wine grapes, you can grow your own hops, and you can make your own beer and wine. So if we're going to look at a scheme that already exists, which is the only scheme Congress is going to consider, that you might as well pick the one evil we can work with. And I think we can work with the beer and wine industry because the pharmaceutical industry and the tobacco industry are going to be impossible for cannabis.
Well, my comment is that the problem is that the beer and wine industry focuses on cannabis as a relaxant or a social intoxicant. And that is certainly an aspect of cannabis's existence, but it's not medical. And so my concern is that it plays into the hands of people who discredit medical marijuana by saying it is merely a subterfuge for permitting social marijuana. But of course, in the end, the battle is going to be that someone is going to try to control the phenomenon. I keep trying to push for the idea that it needs to be we the people. But we know that the federal government already has a patent that it owns on cannabinoid medicine. Right. And we already know that the federal government announced without any fanfare about 2-3 months ago that it had entered into a licensing agreement with one company. Yep. And that exclusive license is going to permit that company to bring the medical marijuana phenomenon to the pharmacies. So I'd say that that's already a done deal. And that's the reason why we've had the crackdown. The recent federal crackdown, in my view, was nothing other than the federal powers that be giving the confirmation that was needed that, yes, go ahead and invest gajillions into this marijuana product for pharmacies. We'll do our part and keep the people from getting their own medical marijuana so you can get your investment return by going ahead and developing and putting medicines out. And they'll make a tremendous return. You know, the government already owns everything. We don't realize it as much because I just saw a video that really broke it down. But between the bailouts and the government's activity in regulating, the government already owns everything. And this is one more thing.
Whatever the government claims they own, it's actually the Federal Reserve that then owns them. So
there you go. And that one of the other things we'll be listening to from Ron Paul and from Aaron Russo is revealing who the Wizards of Oz really are. And that is the Fed, and that is these are people who can print all the money in the world they want. They don't want more money, DJ. They want control. They want you and your family and me and everyone on their control grid with a chip implanted and total control over their finances, their health, what they can read and think and see and do with their bodies. And marijuana is just the canary in the mine shaft. So I'm so happy that you're part of this phenomenon, that we're fighting it together.
Right, and I hope everybody realizes, this is just one, this particular issue, of course, is the one we're very passionate about, but there are so many issues right now that need to be addressed. And, I was down there, I was doing Occupy 420 while the occupation was down there at City Hall. And it was interesting to show up there at the very beginning and explain to them that the problems that they're fighting with the federal government and the problems that the cannabis community have had with the prohibition on cannabis and hemp are all linked. And I'll tell you, by the time, within 3 weeks of myself and others being down there educating people, everybody down there was really much more knowledgeable about cannabis hemp. They were actually not allowing people to medicate within the campsite, and I had to explain to them that the South Lawn steps are the place in the city where the LAPD actually wants patients to use their medication. And I know this from having spent hours and hours at City Hall. I would just go straight up to an officer in City Hall and say, I'm a patient, I need to use my medicine, where do you want me to do that? And they would point to the steps on the South Lawn. They were like, go smoke it in the free speech area there, we'll see, you will know what's going on, it's fine. So I had to explain it to the occupation, like, this is where we're supposed to smoke. And it really changed the whole kind of face of what went on in the occupation. All the cannabis people then moved their tents up around the steppe area and started what they were calling their own sovereign nation of just cannabis crusaders. And it's interesting to see this. And that, I mean, like I said, it's all linked. The Federal Reserve, what's going on with our medicine, our money, Monsanto, you name it, it's all part of the same, what we call the big evil. And I just hope that everyday people get up and get fired up about something and go change something, because there's so many things to choose from. You can go fight for to make this world a better place. I just hope all of our listeners do it every day.
That's right. Well, just like as we wind up, just like I've heard Alex Jones say on his program, and it's just true, if you're hearing this message, you are the resistance. You are we the people. And really the coalition, right, and the coalition is everyone who is we the people. It's men's rights, women's rights, fathers' rights, gay rights, pot rights, you name it, we can get together as a coalition. The people who realize that the system is fucked up. And so, yes, pick your topic, but also keep your brain global, because it is definitely linked.
Yeah, it's all a huge global problem. It's a very exciting time to be alive right now. Like I said, your listeners can find me at cannabissaveslives.org. All of our organization's contact information is there. If any of the listeners are interested in becoming an ongoing member of PAN so that they can get this kind of information by picking up the phone or getting my email updates, I would. PAN is certainly needing more sponsorship. For an activist, funding is kind of like lubricant. It just makes things kind of happen a little faster, and we don't have to worry about sending our advocates off to go work other day jobs while we should be doing this full time.
Well, listen, DeJay has a 501c3. Hold on. We're going to get these dogs caged.
They have something to say, too.
Yeah, they definitely have canine activism. DeJay has a 501c3 entity, which means that you listeners can get a tax deduction by giving money to Patient Advocacy Network. And the thing is, some jillionaire that's listening that wants to make a difference, you heard DeJay, you heard how smart she is, and you heard me, you heard how, not smart, but at least very charming and smooth I sound this morning. So, hey, you could give a whole bunch of money to DeJay. I can quit my current practice, and we will go fight for these rights all around the world, including Sacramento and Washington.
Right. You serve on our advisory board, and, PAN has always been open to the idea of putting forth a good federal lawsuit, and you know, to help kind of at least get some attention toward these really skewed, flawed laws that were probably even passed illegally. And, yeah, to fight in the good fight, Stewie. Thanks for having me today.
My pleasure. Thank you. Take good care.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That's Dejay Couture.
Now, we're going to have a couple videos here as we go to break. One of them, and I meant to get to this last week when he died, but on January 4th, but we ended up making the tribute and then running out of time to air it, so I wanted to properly talk about him. Just a great fighter for basic liberty and freedom, a gentleman that we'd only interviewed once, but I was aware of more than a decade ago, friends with Willie Nelson, mutual friends. Gatewood Galbraith was an American lawyer and author from the U.S. state of Kentucky. He was a 5-time candidate for governor of Kentucky, an author, outspoken proponent of marijuana legalization and privacy rights, other civil liberties. In his writing and speeches, Galbraith went into detail on what he termed synthetic subversion. The theories seek to explain how and why America, specifically Kentucky, moved from agricultural agrarian society into an industrial synthetic society. It's all about control. Galbraith claimed that the beginning of the shift can be traced back to the New Deal spearheaded by Franklin Roosevelt's administration. Up until the 30s, America and Kentucky relied solely on agriculture to fuel the economy. Galbraith argued that out of necessity, Roosevelt shifted America towards a more industrial, synthetic society fueled by alliances with greedy corporations. Gatewood died in his sleep due to complications from emphysema. So we're going to play a little clip from him on the radio show last year, and you can see the whole thing at prisonplanet.tv or on our YouTube channel for free. And then we have a very touching video of a group I know is doing a lot of good work with meager funds. And a lot of people like to demonize the Muslims or anybody with brown skin and say they deserve to die. There's a lot of videos of troops shooting kids and laughing and killing dogs and laughing. And people say the dogs are Al-Qaeda, the kids are Al-Qaeda, they all deserve it. But these are just some of the little kids that you need to look at, understand what war is really all about. Those of you that haven't been involved in it and think it's so sexy and powerful, this is the No More Victims group, and we'll have their website, nomorevictims.org, if you want to check that out and try to donate to help these children. I'm all for Wounded Warrior programs because the VA won't help the troops. They're too busy stealing all the money. But you also should help the kids. It's over 1 million dead Iraqis, but the walking dead, the walking wounded, those, the birth defects, the DU that our troops are now experiencing with their children, it's all part of the wages of sin, the wages of preemptive war. The wages of empire is enslavement and impoverishment for all of us. And for those of you that laugh at these little Iraqis, because I know you will, a lot of you think it's really sexy to kill little kids, don't worry, you'll all get it repaid to you in spades by your own sick life. I wouldn't want to be somebody like you, like a moth attracted to evil. I don't know who you are, but I know you're out there. I don't understand you, but I do understand you're a cockroach. So we'll go to that video as well and come back with our interview of somebody truly taking action. It's InfoWars Nightly News. Stay with us.
I decided to go to college, become an attorney, and while I was going to do that, I was going to become governor of Kentucky and lift Kentucky out of poverty by changing the marijuana laws. So that was in 1971, and I've gotten up every day for the last 40 years to do exactly that. I became an attorney. I have tried to change the marijuana laws, but other states have beat us to it. I was going to try to revitalize Kentucky's economy over it. It looks like we still may be able to, but I've run for office on various occasions. But what's happening is that we're being taken over by the people I call the petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate, fascist, elite SOBs, who've never said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America or to the republic for which it stands, and they're not warm and fuzzy about you and me or our children or grandchildren. And they see the Constitution and the Bill of Rights as impediments to the implementation of a new world order and global economy.
They know marijuana does not make you crazy. They know marijuana does not lead you to crime. They know marijuana does not lead you to harder drugs. But marijuana is a system of control that they can exercise over you because you step out of line from their corporate policies.
Marijuana is a benchmark question for many reasons. Number one, a society that can accommodate alcohol and tobacco has absolutely no argument with marijuana, which is far less harmful than either of those two. The state has no right to tell the individual he cannot alter his consciousness. If he can do that respectably and in a non-violent or threatening manner, then he should be able to do that. Not with addictive drugs. Not with addictive drugs. I am not talking about legalizing drugs. I'm talking about licensing and regulating marijuana as a cash crop in the state of Kentucky. I can kick crack and cocaine and heroin out of the state of Kentucky. I can solve that problem. My granddaddy never grew crack or cocaine or heroin, but he used to grow the hell out of hemp. And when he did, we used to make a pretty penny on it. I'll kick crack and cocaine and heroin out because what I'm going to do is I'm going to tax and regulate the marijuana smoker and remove them as a buffer zone from around the hard drug market. You know, as a marijuana smoker, I resent being forced to run involuntary interference with the hard drug market. I don't belong in that same category. I will not be placed in that same category. And I sure as hell, I'm not going to be going through my life as an adult in this society looking over my shoulder, wondering when the government is going to pounce out and haul me off and hold me in a cage for ransom because of my association with the green plant my granddad used to grow. You know, if we're going to fight about this, we're going to fight about it in front of the courthouse with a bullhorn at 12 noon in the sunshine with the public watching. And if we're going to fight about it, we're going to fight about it politically and through the system. And we're just going to flat take over the system and remove this kind of asinine fascist law and this kind of asinine fascist mentality from existence in this society. My main issue and fear is that the whole bundle of rights of individual free choice held by the individuals in this country and citizens in this country, the kinds of freedoms that our forefathers fought and died for since 1776, that our subsequent generations have gone to war for, are now under assault by the present administration and the past administration and its two-term stay in office. These people, Ronald Reagan and George Bush, are not conservatives. These people are aliens. These people have nothing to do with conservatism. When I was growing up, conservative meant you kept the government in a little box. You didn't let it out. The government stayed in a little box because when you let government out of that box, it started exponentiating and feeding upon itself, becoming self-serving and always against the interest of the people. Inexorably, it will grow to occupy the space currently occupied by our civil liberties, and it has been doing so for the last 40 years. Ronald Reagan snookered the public and said that he was going to take government off the backs of business. He did that, but he put government directly on the backs of the people. He took all that built-up government, he gutted the social programs, and took all that money and fed his cronies with it, and then brought in the military and the police force to ride herd on the population. That's exactly what's happened. I'm going to reverse that effect. When I get to be governor of the state of Kentucky, I'm going to put that government back in the box. I'm going to tell the government we don't have the right to interfere in a lot of different aspects of individuals' lives in this state. The true, real battle going on today had its inception formally in the 1937 New Deal legislation. And what it comes down to is a present-day battle, not between the cops and the robbers, not between communism and free enterprise, not between black and white, not between Muslim and Christian. The real true battle today and on this planet is the natural cycle versus the synthetic cycle of things. It wasn't until the 1890s, 1900s, and 1910s that they found out what petroleum could be used for as far as synthesizing products. That they then found out they could make fiber out of it, they could make medicine out of it, they could make all kinds of fuel out of it. And they conspired to assume a monopoly over those commodities in this country. And looking around, they realized what it took me 18 years to realize, that the greatest competitive product, that the most petroleum-like substance that could be produced from the natural cycle of things was hemp. Hemp is petroleum. Everything you make out of petroleum, you can make out of hemp, including cellophane, plastics, TNT, explosives, motor oil, fuel, cloth, medicine, food. Hemp is the most beneficial plant that mankind has ever domesticated on this globe. And the petrochemical industries took advantage of the flood of New Deal legislation in 1936 and 7, when government and business struck a new deal, leaving people and the citizen out of the negotiations. That all this New Deal legislation came about where all these regulations were written to regulate all these industries, but they were written by those very industry executives. And what those regulations did, in effect, was to give the monopolies to the large industries, specifically the petrochemical industries in this country. For instance, it is no coincidence that in 1937 hemp was outlawed and nylon was patented.
Thank you very much for joining 420 Law Office Radio. Remember, this program is not intended to replace your own relationship with your own licensed attorney, your physician or health professional, or your economic planner or your estate planner. Remember, you should only use licensed professionals. And this program is not intended to create an attorney-client relationship. It's general information only. However, to create an attorney-client relationship, give our office a call and put us to work. All right, take good care and thanks again. This program is copyright 2012 Stuart Richland, all rights reserved. No claim is made to those items that we have borrowed from the internet pursuant to the fair use doctrine.
Just to know what the siren searching for someone. Search, well I may know what we're all victims, maybe underneath the method of the team who needed more security. Campus was criminal and the traffic lights. They said it was security, but they just wanted our rights. The world's not spinning. Campus only fall until you bring the bears to believe that's all. Once in the morning, but it's really late at night. They never gonna shoot them, they never let us die. Look up, look down, see the cameras all around. Right there in the sky, see the cameras way up high. Watch every time that you go anywhere. They know your face and the run of your hair. And they know the sound of your dog. They watch your dead, so just to know what. The siren searching for someone. Search, well they know what.
Our music is by The Ridiculites. Copyright 2011, all rights reserved. Used with permission.